She was just trying to finish her day on the farm when a lost biker showed up out of nowhere. Muddy, tired, and clearly out of place. But instead of turning him away, this single mom offered him help. What she didn't know is that this man wasn't just lost, he was a billionaire. And he was about to return with something no one in that quiet town could have expected: a helicopter. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Rachel Morgan adjusted the wide-brimmed straw hat on her head and wiped a bead of sweat from her brow. The summer sun bore down on the rolling fields of Bramblewood Farm, bleaching the grass to a pale gold and turning the horizon into a shimmering haze. She exhaled slowly, scanning the plot where her herd of goats usually grazed. Only a few scampered about, and the rest clustered near a half-dry watering trough. The sight pained her. A drought this severe was more than an inconvenience. It was a threat to everything she'd worked for. Rachel's farm wasn't large, but it was all she had. After her divorce, she'd poured every ounce of determination into transforming the modest acreage into a haven for herself and her 9-year-old daughter, Lily. They sold homemade goat cheese at the local farmer's market, along with fresh eggs from the small chicken coop by the barn. On better weeks, Rachel might manage to scrape together enough to fix the leaking roof or mend a broken fence post. On tougher weeks, she worried about how to keep the lights on. Still, she woke each day with renewed resolve, determined to prove that a single mom could handle a farm on her own. She'd learned to drive the tractor, patch irrigation lines, and even tackle rudimentary carpentry. Kindness from neighbors kept her afloat when things got tight, but she hated feeling like a charity case. She wanted to stand on her own feet. That particular afternoon, the sky held no promise of rain. A hot wind sent dust spiraling across the yard, stinging Rachel's eyes. She set down the feed bucket she'd been carrying and rubbed her hands on her worn jeans. Just as she turned to head back to the barn, the distant rumble of a motorcycle cut through the still air. In Bramblewood County, the roads were long and winding, dotted with caution signs about deer crossings and unexpected bends. Motorcycles weren't rare, but it wasn't often one came roaring up the dirt lane leading to Rachel's property. She watched curiously as the rider approached, fighting to maintain balance on the uneven path. A swirl of dust enveloped him when he finally braked near the goat pen. He wore a black leather jacket and a helmet with a mirrored visor. The bike itself was a sleek machine that looked out of place among the rustic scenery. Rachel felt a spark of apprehension. Strangers rarely ventured this deep into farmland without a reason. But she forced herself to remain calm. The rider killed the engine, swung his leg over the seat, and removed the helmet, revealing disheveled dark hair and a face flushed with exertion. "Afternoon," he said, voice a touch raspy. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. I think I took a wrong turn back on Route 89. My phone died, and I've been riding in circles for the last hour." He introduced himself as Nick Lockwood, offering a hand smudged with dust. Rachel noticed a faint accent she couldn't place. She accepted the handshake and introduced herself in return, an odd tension hovering in the air. In his eyes, she saw genuine fatigue behind a polite smile. "Car trouble?" she asked, nodding toward the bike. Nick grimaced. "Seems like I might have blown a fuse. The electronics are acting up. Without a working phone or GPS, I'm pretty much stuck. Do you happen to know where I could get a tow or maybe recharge my battery?" Rachel pursed her lips, thinking of the nearest mechanic's shop. It was close to 15 miles away in the opposite direction of the main highway, a place that might already be closed for the evening. Then she glanced at the faint orange creeping across the sky. Sunset was only a couple of hours off. She didn't relish the idea of leaving a stranger stranded, but she also hesitated to invite trouble. Her hesitation must have been obvious, because Nick lifted both hands in a gesture of surrender. "I promise I'm not looking for anything but help," he said. "I can pay you for any inconvenience." The sincerity in his voice outweighed her caution. Something about the way he stood there, sweaty and frustrated, softened her defenses. She gestured toward the barn. "Well, I've got a small generator I sometimes use. You can try charging your battery. If that doesn't work, I have a landline inside the house. You can call for a tow in the morning." Nick's relief was palpable. He rolled the bike carefully to an open spot near the barn, wincing each time it jerked. Rachel showed him the generator and a cluster of tools that might help. Together, they worked to remove a panel on the side of the motorcycle so Nick could inspect the wiring. While he tinkered, Rachel kept an eye on Lily, who'd emerged from the house and was now curiously watching the newcomer from a safe distance. Half an hour passed with no success. Nick's expression grew stormy as he tried to fix the fuse. Rachel offered him a glass of lemonade, her own frustration mounting. Evening light slanted across the fields, highlighting the dryness of the earth. She realized they wouldn't solve the mechanical issue tonight. "You might as well come inside," she said at last. "No sense fighting it any longer. I'll give you a place to sleep for the night." Then, as a precaution, she added, "Just so you know, I keep a shotgun behind the door. I don't anticipate needing it, but I can't be too careful with my daughter around." Nick gave a short laugh. "Understandable. I'd do the same if I were in your position. Honestly, I'm grateful for your hospitality. It's been a rough day." Inside the farmhouse, Lily perched on the edge of the couch, wide-eyed. She looked from Nick to her mother with silent curiosity. Rachel introduced them, noticing how gently Nick spoke to the girl, as though trying to reassure her that he posed no threat. Something in that gesture put Rachel more at ease. Dinner was a simple affair: scrambled eggs, toast, and a few slices of home-cured ham. Rachel apologized for the limited menu, but Nick claimed it was the best meal he'd had in ages. He complimented the cozy interior of the house, with its mismatched curtains and well-worn furniture. When Lily timidly asked about his motorcycle, Nick described how he'd traveled across multiple states, searching for scenic routes and local hidden gems. Rachel found herself unexpectedly drawn into his stories, intrigued by the notion of a life unmoored from one place. She'd barely left Bramblewood County in her entire life. Hearing of canyons, deserts, and mountain highways sparked a longing she'd never admitted. Still, a single glance at Lily reminded her that her roots were here. And that was that. Later, Rachel dug out some spare blankets and set up a small bed in the den. Nick insisted on sleeping in the barn, not wanting to inconvenience her or Lily. She refused, pointing out that the barn was sweltering and infested with mosquitoes. He finally conceded, thanking her again with an earnestness that seemed almost out of place. She wondered who this man really was, but she didn't press him for details. Night fell quietly over the farm. After Lily went to bed, Rachel sat at the kitchen table sipping tea and thinking about how strange the day had been. It was unusual enough to have a lost biker appear in her driveway, but everything about him seemed to carry an air of mystery. She recalled how Nick had mentioned traveling for months, yet offered few specifics about his background. Her mind drifted to the battered leather jacket he'd hung by the door, a jacket that looked expensive beneath the dust. Even his watch, glimpsed briefly when he rolled up his sleeve, seemed more high-end than she'd expect from someone just roaming across the country on a motorcycle. Despite her curiosity, exhaustion soon pulled her to bed. Sleep came fitfully as she wrestled with half-formed questions and anxieties about finances. The next morning, she was jolted awake by Lily's laughter. Rachel threw on a robe and hurried outside to see Nick kneeling on the dusty ground, letting the goats crowd around him while Lily giggled at the scene. It was an image so out of place that Rachel had to stifle a laugh herself. "Morning," Nick said with a sheepish grin, rising to his feet. "Tried my luck with the bike again, but no dice. If it's okay, I'll call a tow company once the local shop's open." Rachel glanced at the goats, then at Lily's bright smile. It was a pleasant surprise to see her daughter warming up to a stranger so quickly. "Sure," she replied. "Meanwhile, I'll get some coffee on." They walked back to the house, where Nick made a quick phone call on the landline. Rachel busied herself making breakfast, her mind still spinning from the novelty of the situation. As he hung up the phone, Nick approached the kitchen table with a cautious look. "I have a small favor to ask," he began. "My bank card got locked yesterday for suspicious activity. I've been on the road so long that the charges raised a flag, apparently. The tow company said they'll take a check, but I'm fresh out of those. Could I pay you back later if you cover me for now?" Alarm bells sounded faintly in Rachel's mind, but she saw no deception in his face. She'd been in financial binds enough times to recognize genuine worry when she saw it. And while he might be a stranger, he'd done nothing to harm her trust so far. Deciding quickly, she nodded. "All right, but you'd better keep your word. I can't afford to be out much more than a towing fee. I barely have enough savings as it is." Nick exhaled, relief evident on his features. "I promise you won't regret it. Once I get my accounts straightened out, I'll repay every cent, and then some." Rachel forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Nick Lockwood than met the eye. The next few hours would reveal whether her guarded kindness was a risk worth taking, or the beginning of a trouble she hadn't anticipated. Rachel's lingering doubts hovered like a thin fog she couldn't quite brush aside. Even so, she handed Nick a small check, the amount enough to cover the tow, but not so large it would sink her if he never repaid it. He took it with a humble nod and murmured his thanks. While they waited for the tow truck, he wandered outside to examine his bike again, leaving Rachel alone with her swirling thoughts. She stared at the coffee pot, listening to it sputter. Her eyes flicked over to Lily's backpack, resting by the door. Tomorrow was the first day of summer camp, something Lily had been looking forward to for weeks. The camp fees had already strained Rachel's budget. She inhaled slowly, reminding herself that trusting Nick might not be a mistake. If she never took chances, nothing would ever get better. Outside, she heard Lily squeal with delight. Rachel peered through the window and saw Nick crouched near the goat pen, coaxing Lily to feed one of the more skittish goats. His black hair fell in unruly waves across his forehead as he grinned up at her daughter. If he was a con artist, he was either the best she'd ever seen or genuinely kind-hearted. She watched the pair for a long moment, letting a tiny seed of warmth take root in her chest. Around mid-morning, the tow truck finally rumbled up the driveway. A broad-shouldered driver hopped out, tipping his cap at Rachel with a brisk, "Ma'am." He gave Nick's motorcycle a quick once-over and whistled low. "Seen better days," he observed. "You want it towed back to Barton's garage, right? That's what we do for out-of-towners." Nick nodded, raking a hand through his hair. "Yes, sir, and I promise you'll be paid in full. Just need a little help for the moment." With the check signed and the bike secured onto the truck, the driver cast a curious glance at Rachel. "You sure about this? The nearest shop's a good ways out. Could run up your total real fast." His tone carried a gentle note of warning. Rachel nodded, doing her best to sound more confident than she felt. "We'll manage," she said. Nick shot her a grateful look, but Rachel avoided his eyes, focusing on Lily and the goats behind her. She needed to keep a level head. They watched the truck disappear into a cloud of dust. An awkward silence settled between them. Nick cleared his throat. "They said it'll be at least 3 days," he explained. "Barton's is backed up and parts might have to be ordered, if it's not too much trouble. Do you know any place I could stay that won't cost an arm and a leg? I can reimburse them once my bank sorts everything out." Rachel hesitated, picturing the single motel in town, a shabby place that overcharged even for a single night. She imagined Nick stranded there, counting every cent, all while his bank card remained locked. Part of her wanted to tell him it wasn't her concern, that she'd done enough. But then she saw the faint droop in his shoulders and the nervous tension in his jaw. Something tugged at her. She remembered how many times good people had given her a hand when she was desperate. "We have a spare cot in the barn loft," she said, surprising even herself. "It's not fancy, but the roof doesn't leak too badly over that spot. I'll make sure it's livable. You can help me around the farm to earn your keep if you'd like." Gratitude and relief chased across Nick's features. "I'd appreciate that more than I can say. I'm not afraid of hard work. Just let me know how I can pitch in." That settled it. Rachel led him inside to gather clean linens, rummaging in a closet that smelled faintly of mothballs. She directed Lily to help, and the girl skipped off to fetch a spare blanket from the hall. As they worked, Nick glanced around at the scuffed floors and peeling wallpaper. There was no pity in his eyes, only a kind of thoughtful respect. "You run this place on your own?" he asked quietly, folding a sheet. "That's right." Rachel tried to sound matter-of-fact, but a small flicker of pride lit her chest. "Got goats, chickens, a couple of old dogs. No staff, no farm hands. It's just me and Lily." Nick gave a low whistle. "That's impressive. I can barely fix my own breakfast most days, let alone manage livestock." She shrugged, though she couldn't hide a faint smile. "You learn fast when you have to." They lugged the bedding out to the barn. The smell of hay and warm dust enveloped them as soon as they pushed open the creaking door. Rachel climbed the wooden ladder to the loft, checking for any leaks or rotted boards. Satisfied, she spread out the linens while Nick helped sweep away bits of straw. "You'll have to watch out for mice," she warned, tucking corners. "They're harmless enough but persistent. Also, it gets real hot up here in the afternoon, so you might want to keep the windows open at night." Nick nodded gravely, as though memorizing every tip. "I'll survive. And thank you again." He seemed sincere, almost out of his depth. Rachel wondered what circumstances had led him to roam the country on that high-end bike. But she wasn't about to pry. It wasn't her business. She climbed down and beckoned him to follow. On the ground floor, Lily was attempting to carry an oversized feed bag, her face scrunched with the effort. "Whoa, careful," Nick called, hurrying over. "That's almost as big as you are." He reached out to steady the bag before it toppled onto Lily's foot. Rachel gave Lily a playful, stern look. "Next time, ask for help, Peanut. You'll strain your back." Lily put her hands on her hips. "I'm not a peanut," she protested, a grin tugging at her lips. Nick chuckled. The day drifted into a pattern of small tasks. Feeding the animals, repairing a sagging fence post, collecting eggs from the coop. Nick jumped into every chore with eagerness, though he clearly lacked experience. Rachel discovered he had a quick mind. If she demonstrated something once, he was ready to try it himself. Still, she sensed an unfamiliar clumsiness in him, as though manual labor was a foreign concept. The puzzle of Nick Lockwood's background only deepened. Just before midday, they broke for lunch. Simple sandwiches and a handful of fresh vegetables from the garden. Lily chattered about her upcoming camp, describing the swimming lessons and arts and crafts sessions. Nick listened with genuine interest, occasionally posing questions that made Lily glow with excitement. Rachel caught her daughter's eye and gave a subtle nod of approval. She was pleased to see Lily so at ease. Then, as they rinsed their plates, Nick's phone buzzed from the windowsill where it sat charging. He scooped it up, glancing at the screen, and a fleeting flicker of tension crossed his face. Rachel pretended not to notice. When he stepped outside to take the call, though, curiosity tugged at her. She moved to the open window, hearing only muffled snatches of conversation, references to accounts and documents, followed by a carefully measured, "I said I'm handling it." He reappeared moments later, wearing a tight smile. "Bank update," he said blandly. "They're still sorting it out. Sorry if I worried you." Rachel forced a smile. "No problem." They walked back to the barn in near silence. She didn't pry, but she couldn't shake the uneasy suspicion that Nick's situation ran deeper than a locked bank card. As if sensing her thoughts, he paused at the barn door. "I owe you an explanation," he said softly, meeting her gaze. "You're going out on a limb for me, and That call probably sounded strange. Rachel hesitated. She wanted to say that he owed her nothing, that his troubles were his own affair. Yet caution told her to hear him out. "All right," she said, folding her arms. "Go ahead." Nick sighed, raking his fingers through his hair. "I've been traveling for a while, yes, but it's not just for fun. I left some complicated circumstances behind." He cleared his throat. "My family runs a conglomerate. Big money, big responsibilities. I wanted to see the world on my own terms, away from expectations. Let's just say they're not happy with me right now." Rachel blinked. "A conglomerate? So you're—" He grimaced. "I guess you could call me well off, or at least I would be if I stayed plugged into the corporate side. But I'm on my own path for now, which put me at odds with certain people. They froze my main account, claiming it was for security checks. It'll blow over, but until then, I'm basically stuck." The explanation made sense in a surreal way. Rachel studied his face for signs of a lie, but saw only sheepish honesty. "So you're rich, but kind of running away?" He managed a half smile. "That's an oversimplification, but yeah, not too far off. I needed to figure out who I am without my family's money overshadowing everything." The news left her speechless. It was almost comical. A single mom farmer inadvertently hosting a rebellious heir. She remembered the watch, the jacket, pieces that hinted at wealth. Now she understood. "So you're telling me you'll eventually have the funds to pay me back," she finally said, arching an eyebrow. "Once this freeze is lifted?" Nick's smile grew self-deprecating. "Yes, absolutely. And beyond that, if there's anything you need, I want to help. Once I'm back on my feet." Rachel held up a hand. "I'm not looking for charity." "No, I get that," he said quickly. "But I won't forget what you've done. My family might have money, but rarely have I seen kindness like yours." Caught between disbelief and amusement, Rachel nodded. "All right. Let's focus on the present. You said you'd help around the farm until your bike's fixed. Let's do that." He agreed, relief lacing his voice. They spent the afternoon mending a broken water pipe near the goat enclosure. Rachel showed Nick how to align the replacement pieces, and he quickly learned to handle the pipe clamps. Sweat trickled down her temples as the sun pounded overhead. Dust clung to every inch of their clothing, but Nick didn't complain. While he held one end of the pipe in place, Rachel twisted the connector tight. "So, once your finances are sorted, you'll hop back on that bike and ride off? Any idea where you're going next?" Nick shrugged, his expression introspective. "I'm not sure. I was riding west, planning to see the coast. Maybe I'll continue, maybe not." Rachel remembered Lily's camp, remembered the precarious state of her bank balance. "Must be nice to have that freedom," she said, her tone soft. He hesitated. "Sometimes it is. Other times it feels like drifting with no real anchor." They finished the repair in companionable silence. When water began flowing properly, they both whooped in success. Nick smiled down at the goats, nudging his ankles. "I see why you love this place. It's challenging, but genuine." Rachel stifled a laugh as one goat tugged at Nick's pant leg. "Yeah, it's genuine all right. I just wish it paid a bit better." They trudged back to the house, dusted themselves off, and settled at the table for a quick snack. Lily bounced in, announcing she'd packed her bag for camp. She insisted that Nick should see all the crafts she planned to make, piling colored yarn and glue sticks in front of him. He listened earnestly, nodding as though her plans were the most fascinating thing in the world. Later, as dusk settled over the farm, Nick hoisted himself up to the loft. Rachel watched from below, holding a lantern. "If you need anything," she called, "just holler." "Got it," he replied. "Thanks again." She headed back to the house, listening to the faint rustle of animals in the barn. Tomorrow, Lily would start camp. Rachel worried over the camp fees. If Nick turned out to be telling the truth, she'd get her tow money back soon. If not, well, she'd figure something out. She always did. Before bed, she double-checked the locks on the doors, out of habit as much as for safety. Her gaze drifted toward the barn. So many questions lingered, but for now, she'd done what she believed was right. She flicked off the light, wondering if she had inadvertently sheltered a billionaire runaway, or simply a restless soul seeking a place to belong. Morning dawned with a warm breeze drifting through the open windows of the farmhouse, carrying the scent of sun-heated grass. Rachel woke earlier than usual, eager to get Lily ready for the first day of camp. She nudged the bedroom curtains aside and glimpsed the barn, where Nick was presumably still asleep in the loft. Part of her wanted to knock on the barn door and see if he needed anything for breakfast. Another part reminded her that she barely knew him. Her priority was Lily. Stepping into the hallway, she found her daughter already awake, perched on the edge of her bed and flipping through a camp pamphlet. The sparkle in Lily's eyes made Rachel's heart twinge with fondness. "You excited?" Rachel asked softly, sitting beside her. Lily beamed. "I can't wait, Mom. We'll do archery, crafts, swimming. Some of my friends from school will be there." Rachel smoothed a hand over Lily's braided hair. "You'll have a blast. Let's go eat so we're not late." In the kitchen, she scrambled eggs and toasted bread, humming under her breath as she worked. She could hear muffled footsteps on the porch. A second later, Nick poked his head through the screen door, an apologetic grin on his face. "Morning," he said. "Didn't want to barge in unannounced." Rachel waved him inside. "Come on, we're just about to eat. There's coffee if you want some." Nick paused, then stepped into the kitchen, his hair slightly damp from what must have been a quick wash with the garden hose. He greeted Lily with a warm nod. "Ready for camp?" Lily nodded vigorously, finishing a bite of egg. "Mom says I'll love it," she replied, swallowing hastily. "Someday maybe you can come see it too." Nick's smile flickered. "Maybe so. You'll have to tell me all about it." Rachel pretended not to notice the momentary unease in his expression. She set a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. "Eat up. We have to leave soon to drop Lily off." He picked at the food, sipping coffee in between. It struck Rachel that Nick, for all his claims of wealth, seemed unaccustomed to a steady routine, like sitting down for a family breakfast. The thought made her feel both protective and wary. She couldn't help but remain on her guard, uncertain how his presence might alter her small, carefully balanced world. Before long, Lily bounded off to brush her teeth and pack the last of her art supplies. Rachel and Nick cleared the table in companionable silence. Then Rachel grabbed her keys, ushering Lily outside toward an old pickup truck that had seen better days. Nick lingered at the door. "I can hang around the farm, do chores while you're gone," he offered, rubbing his neck, "unless you want me to go with you." Rachel hesitated. Did she trust him alone with her property? Then again, it wasn't like she had valuables lying about. The truck, the animals, her modest furniture, none of it would fetch much. Besides, he'd already pitched in willingly yesterday. She inhaled, reminding herself that she refused to live in fear. "Sure," she said at last. "If you could check on the goats, refill their trough, and maybe gather the eggs, that'd be a help. I won't be long." Nick's face brightened with relief. "No problem, I'll be careful with the animals." He gave Lily a small wave. "Have fun." Rachel watched Lily wave back before climbing into the passenger seat. As she drove off, she glimpsed Nick standing at the edge of the porch, hands in his pockets. For a fleeting second, the image pulled at her heartstrings. He looked strangely lonely, like a traveler stranded between destinations. Shaking the thought away, she turned her attention to the winding country road. At the summer camp entrance, bright paper banners fluttered from tall fences. Parents milled around, guiding children toward check-in tables. Lily bounced on her toes, half impatient to be free of the car. Rachel slid out, gave her daughter a tight hug, and reminded her to listen to the counselors. Lily rolled her eyes with affectionate exasperation before darting off to join her friends. Rachel lingered a few minutes, making sure Lily got situated. There was a pang in her chest. She'd grown used to having Lily around the farm each day, but seeing her excitement overshadowed any sadness. By the time Rachel returned to the pickup, she felt lighter, as though her daughter's enthusiasm had rubbed off on her. Driving back to Bramblewood Farm, Rachel tried to organize her mental to-do list. They needed to fix a broken hinge on the chicken coop, recheck the well pump, and see if any produce in the garden was ready for harvest. Her bank account weighed on her mind. Nick had promised that once his accounts were unfrozen, he'd repay the towing fee. She prayed it would be soon. The farm seemed unchanged when she arrived. Parking the truck beneath an old oak, she hopped out, scanning the yard. She spotted Nick near the chicken coop, wrestling with a stubborn gate latch. A small flock of hens milled around, clucking indignantly. The sight brought a wry smile to her lips. "Need a hand?" she called. Nick glanced over, relief evident. "Yes, please. This latch is older than dirt, and I think it's jammed." She approached, her boots kicking up small puffs of dust. Together they fiddled with the metal clasp. Nick had managed to remove a layer of rust, but the mechanism still stuck. Rachel pulled a small toolbox from a shelf inside the coop. Within minutes they replaced the latch with a spare one she'd been saving. "That should hold," she murmured, wiping sweat from her forehead. Nick nodded, stepping back to admire their handiwork. He folded his arms, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "I can see how running this place would be tough alone. There's always something to fix, right?" Rachel gave a dry laugh. "Always. By the way, thanks for taking care of the animals this morning." Nick shrugged, but his expression showed quiet pride. "They're not so bad once you figure out their habits. The goats tried to eat my shirt, though." She chuckled. "They do that. I lost a perfectly good flannel last month." Then, abruptly, she felt a pang of awkwardness. They'd fallen into an easy rapport, but she remembered that he was still a near stranger, a guest with uncertain motives. Her smile faded. "I guess we should tackle the next chore. Garden could use some weeding." Nick's gaze flicked to her, something like concern etched in his features, but he nodded. "Lead the way." They spent the next hour kneeling in the garden rows, tugging out stubborn weeds. Nick fumbled at first, uncertain which sprouts were weeds and which were baby vegetables. Rachel guided him with patient explanations until he got the hang of it. By the time they moved to water the plants, midday heat bore down, making sweat bead on both their brows. From there, they walked to the orchard, if a handful of half-wild apple trees could be called an orchard. The gnarled branches hadn't borne good fruit in years, but Rachel refused to cut them down. She said it reminded her of her grandmother's farm from childhood. Nick listened quietly as she shared that memory, leaning against the trunk of the oldest apple tree, whose bark was marked with an ancient carving of someone's initials. "It must be special," he said, "keeping these trees around. Maybe one day they'll yield something good again." "Maybe," Rachel replied, stroking a rough patch of bark. "Or maybe it's just sentimentality. Hard to say." They headed back to the house for lunch, tuna salad sandwiches and iced tea. Nick offered to chop vegetables, and Rachel was thankful for the help. Together they crafted a modest but satisfying meal. Sitting across from each other at the small table, they struck up halting conversation about music, movies, and random hobbies. Rachel discovered Nick had an unexpectedly dry sense of humor, making a few self-deprecating jokes that coaxed genuine laughter from her. Then, as if she'd remembered a hidden truth, she caught herself mid-laugh. She set down her glass. "I appreciate all you're doing," she said, more serious now, "but I hope you understand. I can't keep you here indefinitely." Nick sobered, nodding. "I get it. Soon as my bike's fixed, I'll be out of your hair. I'm really grateful for everything you've done." She felt a twinge of guilt at his subdued expression, but reminded herself it was necessary. Lily's safety and their own stability came first. Before she could say anything more, the phone rang. Rachel got up to answer, half expecting it to be Lily wanting to say hi. Instead, a cheerful receptionist voice chirped, "Ms. Morgan, this is Tammy from Barton's Garage. We've finished the initial inspection on the motorcycle, but we have some issues. Can you drop by so we can discuss the repairs?" Rachel's stomach twisted. Sure. I'll come by this afternoon, thanks." Hanging up, she turned to Nick. "The mechanic wants to talk about your bike. Might not be a simple fix." He grimaced. "Figures. Mind if I tag along to hear them out? Maybe they'll let me speak with them personally." "No problem. Just be prepared for a hefty bill if it's serious." She hesitated. "Not to pry, but do you think your account problems will get resolved soon? I can't afford to go deeper in debt." Nick's jaw tightened. "I understand. Let me see what they say at the garage, and I'll try calling my bank again. I'll figure something out, I promise." Rachel believed he was sincere, yet her caution flared again. Finances were always precarious for her. She couldn't bankroll an expensive repair on faith alone. Still, short of kicking him out to fend for himself, an option she couldn't bring herself to consider, this was the path she'd chosen. They drove to Barton's Garage in her rattling pickup. The garage was a low-slung building on the outskirts of the nearest town, its sign missing a few letters so it read, "B. Arton's Gay Age." Inside, the smell of motor oil and rubber clung to the air. A middle-aged man in grease-stained coveralls greeted them. "Ah, you're here about that fancy bike," he said to Rachel, then looked at Nick. "Must be yours, son. Come on over, let me show you what we found." In the back, the motorcycle was hoisted on a metal lift. The man, who introduced himself as Pete, explained that a crucial wiring harness was fried. The specialized replacement part could take a week to arrive. There was also an issue with the fuel system that needed attention. Pete rattled off an estimated cost that made Rachel's stomach drop. "Maybe we can salvage a used harness," Nick said, forcing optimism. "Anything to cut cost or speed this up." Pete shrugged. "I can check around, see if a salvage yard has one. Won't be guaranteed to last, though. Still want me to try?" Nick glanced at Rachel, who remained silent. His expression turned resolute. "Yes, please. Do whatever you can. I'll pay you for your time and the parts." Pete raised an eyebrow. "Cash or card?" Nick tried for a calm voice. "I'll have fun soon. For now, can you give us a written estimate? I'll get you a deposit as soon as possible." With a dubious nod, Pete scribbled some numbers on a pad. Rachel's eyes scanned the total, her heart pounding. Even if Nick repaid her, she hated the idea of fronting any part of that sum. Nick swallowed, folding the estimate into his jacket pocket. "Thank you," he mumbled to Pete. "We'll be in touch once you confirm the salvage part." They headed back outside, the late afternoon sun glaring off the pavement. Neither spoke until they reached the pickup. Then Nick exhaled, turning to Rachel. "I'm sorry. This is more complicated than I expected. I'll try calling my bank again, see if I can expedite things." Rachel gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. "I get it. But I'm struggling here, Nick. I can't pour money into that bike repair. I'll help however I can, but you have to understand my situation." Nick nodded, shame flickering in his eyes. "Of course. Let me see what I can do tonight." They drove back in uneasy silence. A dust cloud trailed behind the truck on the empty country roads. Rachel's thoughts churned. She remembered how Lily's camp fees had left her account dangerously low. She was trying to scrounge enough for next month's mortgage. If Nick's situation dragged on indefinitely, what then? The sun had dipped toward the horizon when they arrived at the farm, painting the yard in long shadows. Nick thanked her quietly and headed to the barn. She watched him go, feeling conflicted. He was courteous, hard-working, and certainly not flaunting any sense of entitlement. But an intangible weight, hung over the farm now, an uncertainty about what tomorrow might bring. Rachel glanced at the mailbox at the end of the dusty lane. She sighed, stepping out to retrieve the day's mail. Bills, mostly. She leafed through them, each envelope a reminder of her precarious finances. As she slipped back into the house, she couldn't stop a flicker of regret. Maybe letting Nick stay had been a mistake. But she remembered his solemn vow to repay her, and a faint hope stubbornly refused to die. Night settled over Bramblewood Farm in a hush of chirping crickets and distant frog calls. Rachel spent most of the evening paying bills online, squinting at the screen in the dim glow of a single lamp. Her anxiety over the mounting costs weighed on her like a wet blanket. By the time she shut off the computer, a throbbing headache pulsed behind her eyes. She poured a glass of water, sipped it slowly, then headed to the porch for air. The sky stretched wide and clear, dotted with pinpricks of starlight. A half-moon dangled low over the fields. She breathed in the night stillness, trying to calm her thoughts. Her gaze drifted toward the barn, a silent silhouette in the darkness. She wondered if Nick was awake, perhaps worrying as much as she was. Her phone buzzed. Rachel glanced at the screen. A text from Lily, who was allowed to keep a small device for emergencies at camp. The short message read, "Mom, I miss you. Day was fun. Good night." Smiling despite her fatigue, Rachel typed a quick reply, encouraging Lily to rest up for the next day's activities. The exchange soothed some of her internal turmoil. She tucked the phone away, stepping off the porch and onto the dusty path that led to the barn. Halfway there, she paused, unsure if she should intrude on Nick's space. She remembered him saying he'd make more phone calls to sort out his bank trouble. Maybe it was best to let him be, but something compelled her forward. A need to be sure he was coping, or at least not still harboring secrets. She rapped softly on the barn door, then eased it open when no one answered. "Nick?" she called, voice low. "You in here?" A faint rustling came from the loft. After a moment, he peered over the edge, hair mussed, and eyes reflecting the moon's glow from a high window. "Rachel?" he said, surprise in his tone. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, sorry to bother you," she replied, shifting her weight uncertainly. "I was just checking." He climbed down the ladder, moving carefully in the semi-darkness. He wore loose, faded jeans and a t-shirt that clung to him from the lingering heat of the day. "I've been on hold with the bank for an hour," he said, grimacing. "They keep transferring me. It's frustrating, but I'm not giving up." Rachel nodded, arms crossed. "I appreciate that. I know it's not your fault this happened." She hesitated, then sighed. "But I won't lie. This is a tough spot for me, too." Nick rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture she'd come to recognize as his telltale sign of guilt. "I understand. I wish there were a quicker fix. I tried explaining the urgency, but bureaucracy doesn't move fast." They stood there, awkwardness settling around them like dust in a sunbeam. Eventually, Rachel gestured to a couple of old milk crates along the barn wall. "Want to sit a minute?" Nick's brow lifted at the invitation, but he nodded. They dragged the crates forward and perched on them. Above, the rafters creaked softly, and a lone moth fluttered around the overhead bulb. Rachel inhaled the mingled scents of hay and warm wood. "How'd you learn to ride?" she asked, more to break the silence than anything else. "You said you left home to see the world. Did you just hop on a motorcycle one day and go?" A faint smile curved Nick's mouth. "Sort of. I spent a year saving up for that bike. I mean, I had access to money, but I wanted to buy it with my own earnings. I took on odd jobs, bartending, landscaping, whatever I could do without dipping into my family's funds. Finally bought the motorcycle, took a safety course, and just left." Rachel studied him, intrigued. "So you were determined to prove yourself, separate from your family's wealth?" He nodded slowly. "Exactly. My parents wanted me to join the board of our company right out of college. I felt suffocated by the prospect, like my whole life was mapped out. My older brother was already the golden child in business. I was just supposed to fall in line. I guess I wanted to carve out my own identity, see places that weren't just boardrooms and mansions. She found herself drawn in by the sincerity of his words. Well, traveling across the country on a motorcycle isn't the usual path for a corporate heir, she remarked, half teasing. Nick let out a quiet laugh. No, it's definitely not, but I've met amazing people along the way, learned things I'd never have experienced if I stayed in that privileged bubble, like how to fix fences thanks to you. Heat pricked at Rachel's cheeks. I'm not that special, just a single mom trying to keep a farm afloat. That's what makes you special, he countered, his voice low. I've come to realize there's real honor in honest work, in building something with your own hands. It's different from just writing checks. She fiddled with the edge of her crate, unsure how to respond. A part of her wanted to trust him, to believe he was exactly what he appeared, a restless soul with good intentions. Another part recalled how illusions can shatter in an instant. Anyway, Nick said, clearing his throat, I appreciate you letting me stay. I don't take it for granted. Once this account debacle is sorted, I'll handle the repair costs and find a way to repay your kindness. Rachel nodded, forcing a smile. Let's hope that's sooner, rather than later. They sat for a while longer, lapsing into a companionable stillness. Outside, the chirr of crickets rose in a nocturnal chorus. Eventually, Rachel rose, dusting off her jeans. I should get some sleep. Gotta pick Lily up tomorrow afternoon. Nick walked her to the barn door, pausing as she stepped out. Good night, he said softly. Night, she replied, her voice catching. As she returned to the farmhouse, she wondered if letting him stay was forging a deeper connection than she'd intended. On the surface, it was just a practical arrangement, but her emotions weren't so easily contained. She brushed the thought aside, reminding herself that her priorities revolved around Lily and keeping the farm alive. Nick was a passing gust of wind, soon to move on once his bike was fixed and his money unblocked. The next morning, Rachel faced a steady stream of farm tasks. She woke early and found Nick already outside, trying to reroute a small irrigation pipe that ran behind the chicken coop. She raised an eyebrow at the initiative but said nothing, heading first to feed the goats. She smiled to see he'd already filled the trough. His willingness to help truly was a relief. By midday, the two of them had repaired a sagging gate near the orchard and cleared debris from the drainage ditch. They stopped to drink water in the shade, the heat pressing in relentlessly. Rachel wiped sweat from her neck, noticing Nick's gaze flick to her and then away. She coughed lightly, feeling self-conscious. I'm going to head into town soon to pick Lily up from camp. I won't be long. He nodded, tossing a small twig aside. Need me to watch anything here? Just the usual. If we have deliveries, let them drop stuff by the barn. Don't let the goats out of their pen, obviously. And if you don't mind grabbing the mail, that'd be great. Nick grinned. Got it. Mail, goats, deliveries. I can handle that. Rachel went inside to freshen up, swapped her sweaty t-shirt for a clean one, and ran a brush through her hair. As she hopped in the truck, she felt a pang of gratitude at not having to rush Lily to camp each morning. One less stress on her plate. She couldn't help wishing all her worries could be so neatly handled. At the camp, she found Lily chatting animatedly with a friend at the pickup area. Her daughter practically bounced over, cheeks flushed with excitement. Mom! We did water balloon races and friendship bracelets. Look! She held up a wrist, showcasing a colorful braided band. Rachel smiled, heartwarming. That's beautiful, sweet pea. Ready to go home? Lily nodded, climbing into the truck and launching into a rapid-fire story about her day. Rachel's concerns faded for a time, listening to Lily's enthusiasm about every little detail. The drive home was filled with the sweet sound of a happy child's chatter. When they arrived, Lily scrambled out to check on her beloved goats. Rachel, meanwhile, found Nick near the mailbox, a stack of letters in hand. He looked up as she approached, something guarded in his expression. "Hey," he greeted, holding the mail out to her. "There's a letter here that looked kind of official. I didn't open it, of course." Rachel frowned, rifling through the envelopes. Utility bill, a local coupon flyer, and her stomach dropped. A crisp white envelope bearing the return address of First Settlement Bank. She tore it open on the spot, scanning the contents. Her eyes flitted over words like outstanding mortgage balance and final notice. Tension clenched her chest. She'd been scrambling to make partial payments, but apparently it wasn't enough. She inhaled sharply, crumpling the letter in her hand. Glancing at Nick, she managed a stiff smile. "Just money stuff. I'll figure it out." Concern etched his brow. "Do you need help?" "No." She cut him off, more sharply than intended. She forced herself to soften her tone. "I'll manage, thanks. It's just part of life on the farm." Nick didn't push. Instead, he handed over the rest of the mail, stepping aside as Lily came bounding up, eager to show him a bracelet she'd made for Uncle Nick, as she suddenly called him. Rachel almost corrected her, but hesitated. Lily rarely warmed up to people that quickly, yet here she was, giggling and insisting Nick put the bracelet on. He knelt, letting her tie it around his wrist, a crooked knot of multicolored threads. "There," Lily declared proudly. "Now you can't forget us when you leave." Nick's expression flickered, caught between amusement and something more vulnerable. "I won't forget," he murmured. Rachel silently observed, heart twinging at Lily's choice of words. Of course, Nick would leave eventually. She'd known that from the start, but seeing Lily's attachment was a painful reminder of what that might do to her daughter's sensitive spirit. Without comment, she ushered Lily toward the house. They set the mail on the table, the mortgage notice carefully tucked out of sight. She'd handle it later, once Lily was busy. Nick lingered by the door, uncertain if he should follow. "Dinner's in an hour," Rachel said in a subdued voice. "You're welcome to join us." "Thanks," he replied softly. "I'll just wash up." As he headed for the hose, Lily ran off to change, leaving Rachel alone in the kitchen. She pressed her palm against her eyes, fighting the swell of stress from the mortgage letter. Her financial tightrope act had no safety net. One misstep, and she and Lily could lose everything: this house, the land, their dreams. She swallowed hard, blinking away the sting of tears. Letting Nick stay was still the right thing, she told herself. He'd done no wrong, and he was working tirelessly to fix his situation. But she couldn't rely on him for a miracle. She had to face this threat alone, as always. In that moment, she realized how tired she truly was. Tired of scraping by, tired of smiling for Lily's sake while panic churned in her gut. She squared her shoulders and inhaled. She'd feed them a decent meal, tuck Lily into bed, then revisit the numbers. Maybe she could sell a few more goats or cut back somewhere else. She would find a way. She always did. Rachel woke at dawn to the sound of muted clanging outside, likely Nick fiddling with something near the barn again. She lay in bed for a moment, studying the ceiling's faint water stain left by last spring's leaks. Her mind drifted to the mortgage notice, which felt like a ticking clock in the back of her thoughts. She exhaled and pushed herself upright, determined to face another day of endless tasks. Slipping on jeans and a faded t-shirt, she padded into the kitchen. She found Lily curled on the couch, flipping through a children's book about horses. It was still early for her to be awake, but Rachel attributed it to excitement over camp. "Morning, Mom," Lily said, smiling. "I heard banging outside. Is Nick building something?" Rachel arched an eyebrow. "Could be. He's an early riser, I guess. Want some cereal?" Lily nodded, and Rachel poured milk into a bowl of oats and raisins. While Lily ate, Rachel peeked out the window. Sure enough, Nick stood near the old tool shed, rummaging through a pile of scrap wood. His hair was unkempt, and he wore the same t-shirt as the day before. sweat already glistening on his brow in the dawn light. Curious, Rachel slipped into her boots and headed out. As she approached, she noticed a few planks arranged on the ground along with an assortment of nails. Nick glanced up, greeting her with a crooked grin. "Hope I didn't wake you," he said. "I noticed your fence along the east side is practically falling apart, so I thought I'd salvage some boards from the shed. Figured I could start patching it." Rachel hesitated. "That fence is pretty far gone. I've been meaning to replace it for months, but wood is expensive." Nick shrugged. "These boards might do for a temporary fix. Something to at least keep the goats from wandering if they ever get loose. I like staying busy. Helps me not stress about my bank troubles." She studied him, unsure whether to be touched or concerned. "Well, I won't turn down free help," she finally said. "But you don't have to push yourself." A flicker of determination flashed in his eyes. "I want to. It's the least I can do while I'm here." They walked together, carrying the boards in silence until they reached the run-down fence row. The rising sun painted the fields with soft golden light. Birds flitted overhead, and a gentle breeze stirred the grasses. Rachel demonstrated which sections needed bracing, and Nick listened carefully, nodding as she explained the approach. He hammered nails into warped wood, occasionally stepping back to judge his progress. Though he lacked the practiced ease of a seasoned farmer, his willingness to learn impressed her. She offered pointers on handling the hammer and measuring alignment by sight. Time slipped by in a steady rhythm of hammer blows. The day grew hotter, and Nick peeled off his jacket, revealing arms faintly marked by what looked like old scars. Rachel tried not to stare. She guessed they might be from minor accidents on the road, skids, or close calls on the motorcycle. The thought stirred a mixture of empathy and admiration. Eventually, Lily wandered over, shading her eyes with one hand. "Mom, can Nick drive me to camp on his motorcycle someday?" she asked eagerly. "It's so cool." Rachel tensed at the idea. "Sorry, sweetheart, but that's not safe for a kid, especially on these roads. Besides, his bike isn't running right now." Lily pouted briefly, then refocused on Nick. "Well, maybe you'll come to the camp talent show next month. They let families watch." Nick paused his hammering. "A talent show? That's awesome. What's your talent?" Lily grinned. "I'm still thinking. Maybe I'll sing or do a skit with my friend. You should come. Mom can come too," she added, turning her bright gaze on Rachel. Rachel forced a smile, though her chest tightened with worry about how everything might unravel by then. Her mortgage, Nick's indefinite stay. "We'll see," she answered gently. As Lily scampered off, Rachel became acutely aware of Nick's presence again. He gave her a searching look, but neither spoke. Instead, they resumed working. By lunchtime, they'd reinforced a good stretch of fence. The boards weren't pretty, but they'd do the job. They trudged back to the house, sweaty and covered in wood dust. Lily was inside, talking on her tiny phone to a camp friend, so Rachel and Nick stepped onto the porch for a moment of relative quiet. She offered him a pitcher of cold water. He swallowed a mouthful, then let out a grateful sigh. "Thanks," he said. "That was actually kind of satisfying. I never did this kind of manual labor growing up." Rachel smiled slightly. "We have more if you're really that enthusiastic." He returned her smile, a hint of warmth in his eyes. "Keep it coming." But then his grin faltered. "By the way, I tried calling my bank again this morning. No luck. They said I might need to confirm my identity in person at a branch. I'm not sure how that's going to work, given I'm miles away from a major city." An old tension flickered in Rachel's stomach. "I see." "I'm going to keep trying," he promised. "I might even reach out to my older brother if it comes down to it. We're not exactly best friends, but he could expedite things. Problem is, that means letting my family know where I am." She heard the reluctance in his voice. "Would that be so bad?" Nick paused, brow knitting. "They'd want me to come home immediately, drop this trip and resume my seat on the board. They'd hold the purse strings over my head. That's exactly what I was trying to escape. Rachel nodded, torn between sympathy and her own desperate needs. Well, do what you think is best. Just remember I'm in a bind here, financially. He exhaled. I haven't forgotten. They entered the house where Lily was finishing her phone call. The girl beamed at them. Mom, I was just telling Kelly about the goats. She wants to visit sometime. Rachel mustered a cheerful nod, though her mind drifted to the mortgage letter. That's nice, hon. We'll see if we can arrange a play date after camp. They made a simple lunch, cold sandwiches, leftover roasted vegetables, and iced tea. Nick took the initiative to slice tomatoes from Rachel's scraggly garden. Lily filled Nick in on some fun detail from camp, describing a counselor who taught them a silly dance. Rachel watched from the corner of her eye, noticing how Lily laughed, and Nick responded with genuine interest. A twinge of guilt pinched her. She worried Lily would get too attached, only to be disappointed when Nick eventually rode away. But for now, she couldn't bring herself to break the easy warmth between them. After lunch, Lily headed back to camp, this time driven by Rachel. Nick stayed behind, promising to water the garden. The drive to camp was filled with Lily's endless chatter about her new friends. Rachel tried to give the right responses, but her thoughts kept drifting to Nick, the fence, and that dreaded mortgage notice. Upon returning, she spotted Nick in the orchard, clearing weeds around the apple trees. He'd removed his shirt in the heat, wearing just a tank top, his torso damp with sweat. She felt a jolt of surprise. She hadn't expected him to keep working. He glanced up when she neared, offering a small wave. I hope this is okay, he said. I remember you mentioning wanting these trees to thrive again. Figured I'd start by clearing the undergrowth. She crossed her arms, the midday sun forcing her to squint. It's fine. You're going above and beyond. His face turned pensive. I'm not just doing this out of boredom, you know. I want to help you in any way I can. Then he swallowed, looking almost shy. Rachel, I might have another avenue to get the funds faster. It's a friend of mine, not family. He offered once to wire me money if I ever got in a tight spot. A swirl of relief threatened to rise, tempered by caution. That would solve a lot, she admitted, voice tinged with desperation. You'd still owe him, though. Nick shrugged. It's not a massive amount to him. He's a venture capitalist, invests in startups. We met at a business summit before I left home. I rarely tap that connection, but I'm thinking now might be the time. Rachel's pulse quickened. Could it be that a few phone calls to some wealthy friend would fix everything? The cynic in her whispered that it was too convenient. The hopeful side prayed it was true. If it means you can pay for your bike repair and maybe help me recoup the tow fee, then sure, I won't complain. Nick gave a short nod. Let me shower and then I'll try calling him. Wish me luck. She watched him walk away, hair damp against his neck, broad shoulders tense with purpose. In spite of everything, a flicker of admiration for his determination crept through her worry. She turned her attention to the orchard, rummaging in her mind for solutions to her own looming crisis. If Nick did get his money soon, perhaps she could pay down the mortgage a little more. Maybe it would buy her time to find a real fix for the farm's finances. She spent the next hour pulling weeds among the apple trees, letting her mind wander to old memories of planting flowers with her grandmother. Back then, the family farm had seemed like an endless haven of security. Now, she understood how fragile it all was. Eventually, the hot sun drove her indoors. She washed her hands in the kitchen sink, glancing at the clock. Lily would need picking up in a couple more hours. Rachel ventured to the living room and found Nick pacing near the phone. He looked up when she entered, pressing a finger to his lips in a signal to remain quiet. She stood by, heart thumping. After a minute, he said a few final words into the receiver and hung up. Relief and nervousness warred on his face. He's willing, Nick said, voice shaking slightly. He just needs me to fax or email some ID documents. I can do that at the library in town if they have a fax machine or scanner." Rachel felt her breath catch. "They do. Let's go right now before they close." He nodded, grabbing his jacket from a chair. She scribbled a note for Lily, in case her daughter returned from camp and she wasn't back yet. The two hurried outside, tension thrumming in the air. If Nick's friend came through, this might be the break she so desperately needed. They piled into the old pickup, the engine coughing into life. Rachel backed onto the gravel lane, pushing aside the swirl of doubts. If all went well, Nick would have money soon. Money to pay Barton's, money to repay Rachel, and maybe some extra to help with other looming bills. She tried to calm the flutter of hope in her chest, reminding herself not to get carried away. But a tiny spark of optimism ignited, fueling the possibility that her fortunes might change. Rachel gripped the steering wheel as the pickup rattled down the country road toward town. Dust kicked up behind them in a pale cloud, and the late afternoon sun glared through the windshield. Nick sat in the passenger seat, fiddling with the thin manila folder that held his ID and a few other documents he thought might be necessary. He glanced at Rachel, his expression both anxious and hopeful. She tightened her jaw, refusing to jinx the situation by imagining an easy fix. Every part of her wanted this plan to succeed, but she'd learned through hard experience that hope could be fragile. They arrived at the small public library just after 3 o'clock. A faded banner near the entrance announced the upcoming book sale, but the parking lot was almost empty. Rachel parked beside a battered sedan and cut the engine. The building was a single-story brick structure, its windows streaked from a recent drizzle. She remembered coming here with Lily once a month, hunting for children's books in the quiet reading corner. Now she was back on a mission entirely different, one that could determine the farm's fate. Inside, the cool air smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish. Nick followed her past a display of recommended novels to the front desk, where a kindly librarian in a floral blouse peered at them over wire-rimmed glasses. Her name tag read, "Mrs. Kincaid." She seemed pleased to have visitors. "How can I help you folks today?" she asked, setting aside a stack of returns. Nick cleared his throat. "I need to scan and fax some documents to a friend. It's kind of time-sensitive. Do you have the equipment here?" Mrs. Kincaid nodded. "Certainly. Our scanning station is in the corner near the computers. We can send faxes up front. Just let me know when you're ready, dear." Nick thanked her, stepping toward the small alcove where a bulky scanner printer sat on a chipped wooden table. The fluorescent light overhead flickered. Rachel followed, glancing around at the few patrons browsing shelves. A teenage boy typed at a computer terminal, while an older man flipped through newspapers. The hush of the library pressed on Rachel's ears, making every footstep resonate. Nick placed his manila folder on the table and gently extracted a driver's license, a passport, and a utility bill with his name on it, apparently proof of residency from a prior apartment. Rachel kept watch as he fed each page into the scanner. The machine whirred, took a moment to warm up, then spat out digital confirmations on the tiny screen. Outside, a lawnmower droned faintly, the sound drifting through the glass doors. Once the scans were complete, they returned to the front desk. Mrs. Kincaid tapped at her computer, helping Nick compose a fax cover sheet addressed to the out-of-state friend. The library's old fax machine beeped and squealed, finally connecting after a few tries. Nick's shoulders were rigid as though he expected the line to drop at any second, but at last, the transmission completed. "All done," Mrs. Kincaid announced with a smile. "Would you like to send an email with attachments too, just in case?" Nick blinked, relief mingling with fresh gratitude. "That might be best. Thank you." He turned to Rachel. "Could you give me a minute?" She nodded, stepping a short distance away, while Nick borrowed a public computer to create a quick email. Rachel scanned the shelves of new arrivals, trying to distract herself. A children's picture book about farm animals caught her eye, The bright illustrations reminded her of Lily, and she smiled despite the tension, wishing her daughter were here to pick out stories. Finally, Nick emerged, handing over a few dollars to cover the fax and scanning fees. He thanked Mrs. Kincaid profusely. She insisted it was no trouble, then reminded them the library would close in an hour. As they exited, the late daylight slanted across the sidewalk, painting long shadows on the cracked concrete. Outside, Nick paused in the empty lot. He shoved his hands in his pockets. He said he'd wire the money once he confirms my identity. Now that he's got my documents, hopefully it'll just be a day or two. Once that's done, I can settle up with Barton's garage and pay you back. Rachel let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. A day or two, huh? That's amazing. I just hope there are no more holdups. He looked at her, sincerity warming his gaze. Me too. Thank you for coming with me. I know I'm putting you through a lot. She shrugged, forcing a modest smile. I'm just ready for everything to stabilize. Let's get home and see how Lily's day went. Her tone softened at the mention of her daughter. Even amid the chaos, Lily remained her anchor. On the drive back, they slipped into cautious optimism. Nick talked about the friend who was helping him. He described the venture capitalist as an older man who'd taken a liking to Nick's rebellious streak at a business conference. Rachel listened, half in disbelief at how different Nick's world was from hers. Yet strangely, it didn't feel insurmountable. When they pulled up to the farm, the mailbox stood stuffed with a cluster of advertisements and official envelopes. Rachel sighed, grabbing them before they trudged inside. Lily's sneakers were near the porch, indicating she was home. A wave of relief washed over Rachel. Sometimes Lily and a neighbor's kid would get dropped off together, letting themselves in with a key. She was glad to see everything in order. They found Lily at the kitchen table, crayons scattered as she drew a bright scene with goats, a barn, and a smiling stick figure that looked suspiciously like Nick. She brightened when they entered. Look, Mom, I made a card for Nick. It says, "Thank you for helping the goats." Nick's face softened. That's really sweet, Lily. Thank you. He patted her shoulder, then noticed the bright pink bandage on her forearm. What happened there? Lily shrugged. Scraped it at camp. I tripped on the sidewalk. One of the counselors gave me this cool bandage. Rachel felt a pang of motherly guilt. Are you sure you're okay? Lily waved off the concern. I'm fine, Mom. Barely hurt. Nick caught Rachel's eye, offering a small smile of reassurance. Kids bounce back fast. Rachel nodded and set about sorting the mail, heart hammering at each official-looking letter. She prayed there wasn't another dire notice hidden in the stack. Opening a few, she found nothing catastrophic, just the usual monthly statements. She exhaled, tension easing slightly. After Lily finished her masterpiece, Rachel led her to the living room to chat about the day's camp adventures. Nick excused himself to the barn loft, presumably to try calling his friend and confirm the fax had gone through properly. Without him there, the house felt oddly quiet, leaving Rachel uneasy in a way she couldn't fully explain. As dinner time approached, Nick reappeared at the doorway, a hint of triumph in his stance. He got the documents. He's double-checking everything, but if all goes well, the transfer could happen tomorrow. He said he'll text or call me once it's initiated. Rachel's heart fluttered with relief, but she tempered it with caution. That soon, huh? She smiled. That would be a huge help. Nick nodded, looking genuinely pleased. He rolled his shoulder as though shaking off lingering tension. I'll believe it when it's actually in my account, but yes, I'm hopeful. They prepared a simple dinner of pasta and fresh vegetables, working side by side in the kitchen. Lily contributed by setting the table, humming a tune she'd learned at camp. The air vibrated with a certain buoyancy. If Nick's friend pulled through, they might have a real chance to break free of this stalled situation. Over the meal, Lily told them about a group art project at camp, describing how they planned to paint a giant mural. Nick listened attentively, occasionally nodding in encouragement. Rachel was struck again by how easily he engaged with her daughter, as though he'd known Lily much longer than a week. Eventually, Lily trotted off to watch a nature show on the small TV in the living room, leaving Rachel and Nick to finish clearing the dishes. She turned to him, her voice quiet. "Thank you," she said, "for not only pitching in with chores, but for being good to Lily. She likes you a lot." Nick paused in the act of wiping a plate, eyes meeting hers. "I like her a lot too. She's an incredible kid." Rachel nodded, swallowing a subtle rush of emotion. "She deserves good people in her life." They finished tidying up. Before Nick retreated to the barn, Rachel asked, "Could you double-check that the goats are penned in properly? Sometimes they push the gate if it's not latched well." "Sure thing," he replied, stepping outside. A short while later, she peeked into the living room, where Lily lay sprawled on the couch, dozing off amid the soft glow of the TV. Rachel smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, then gently guided her to her bedroom. Once Lily was settled, Rachel stepped onto the darkened porch, enjoying the cool breeze that had finally arrived with evening. She leaned on the railing, eyes drifting over the quiet fields. Her thoughts wandered to the possibility of receiving Nick's payment soon, how it would cover the towing and repairs and maybe even leave her with a little extra to throw at the mortgage. A flicker of hope lit in her chest. If she could just make it through the next month or two, perhaps she could find more stable footing. She considered expanding her goat cheese sales, or maybe taking a stall at a larger farmer's market in the next county. It was a risk, but doing nothing guaranteed failure. Nick's footsteps sounded on the porch. He had his jacket slung over one shoulder and he paused beside her, gazing at the moonlit yard. "All goats secure," he said lightly. "They seem to like me now. Didn't try to chew my clothes for once." Rachel let out a soft laugh, the tension in her chest loosening. "They must sense you're helping keep their home in one piece." She hesitated before adding, "And hopefully soon your friend will come through. Then you can get your bike fixed and figure out your next move." He nodded slowly, his expression tinged with something she couldn't name. "Yeah, my next move." A brief silence fell, punctuated by crickets. Rachel fiddled with her shirt hem. "I don't mean to rush you out, Nick, it's just... You need stability," he finished gently. "I get it. Really, once I have the funds, I'll see what I can do to help you too. I know that might be weird to hear. I promise it wouldn't be charity. Think of it as me repaying kindness with kindness." She bit her lip. The thought of letting him help with her mortgage or bills felt both tempting and unsettling. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it." They stood there a moment longer, the hush of night settling around them. A distant owl hooted, and a light breeze rustled the tops of the trees. Rachel inhaled, letting the fresh air calm her nerves. Inside, Lily's laughter from earlier still echoed in her mind. She wanted a stable future for her daughter, not years of scraping by, waiting for the next crisis. She glanced sidelong at Nick, illuminated by the faint glow of the porch light. In a different world, maybe their paths would have been simpler, free of the weight of finances and secrets. As it was, they were bound together for a short time by circumstance. That closeness felt at once reassuring and precarious. "All right," she said softly. "I'm turning in. Good night, Nick." "Good night," he replied, his voice equally soft. Then he headed toward the barn, footsteps fading into the stillness. Rachel went inside, locked the doors, and made her nightly check of windows. She paused at Lily's room, smiling at the sight of her daughter curled beneath a thin quilt, hair fanned across the pillow. Quietly, Rachel retreated to her own room, exhaustion tugging at her. Before slipping into bed, she allowed one hopeful thought to take shape. Maybe by this time tomorrow, Nick's friend would have wired the money, and some measure of relief would finally be within reach. Dawn broke over Bramblewood Farm with a sullen gray sky, hinting at possible rain for the first time in weeks. Rachel woke earlier than usual, her stomach tight with both anticipation and dread. Today might be the day Nick's friend wired the money, or it might be another disappointment. She rose quickly, pulling on work clothes and slipping into the kitchen. Outside, the horizon glowed faintly like embers under ash. She found Nick already at the table, fiddling with his phone. His hair stuck up in unruly spikes, and he looked as though he hadn't slept much. He glanced at her, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, then tried to smile. "Morning," he said. "I've been refreshing my account status every few minutes, but so far, nothing." Rachel forced a nod, heading to the stove to brew coffee. "It's still early," she reminded him. "Maybe it'll come through in a couple hours. Banks can be slow." She tried to sound confident, though a coil of anxiety tightened in her chest. Every day that passed brought her closer to potential disaster. They drank coffee in subdued silence, broken only by the sound of Lily bounding down the hall. The girl emerged, bright-eyed, backpack in hand. "Mom, is it time for camp yet?" she asked, then spotted Nick. "Did you get your money?" Nick gave her a rueful grin. "Not yet, kiddo, but I'm hopeful." Lily nodded sagely, accepting the answer with a child's faith that everything would work out. Rachel wished she shared that innocence. After a quick breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, Rachel and Lily climbed into the pickup for the drive to camp. Nick stood on the porch, phone clutched in one hand, watching them go with an apologetic half-wave. The moment Rachel turned onto the main road, Lily launched into her usual chatter about the day's activities. Rachel smiled and nodded, but her mind kept drifting to the precarious state of their finances. She dropped Lily off at camp, enduring the swirl of excited children and cheerful counselors. On the way back, she spotted storm clouds gathering overhead. A fine drizzle began to dot the windshield, and she hoped the moisture might help the parched ground. Arriving at the farm, she discovered Nick near the barn, gently corralling a goat that had managed to slip past the fence they'd reinforced. He wrestled with the rope, guiding the stubborn creature back into its enclosure. His jacket and shirt were dotted with raindrops. "Got a runner," he called with a breathless laugh when he saw her. "Guess that fence patch wasn't perfect." Rachel hurried over to secure the gate, glancing at the goat. "We'll have to brace that corner post again. At least it's raining, though. It'll help the crops." Nick nodded, catching his breath. "I'll fix it right after I check if there's any news on my phone." They trudged inside, wiping muddy boots on the welcome mat. Rachel fetched a towel for Nick, who dried his hair absently, eyes locked on his phone. He reloaded his banking app, shoulders tensing at the result. She didn't need to ask to know it was another dead end. "I'll call my friend again," he muttered, voice laced with frustration. "He said it could happen this morning, but maybe the bank needs more time." Rachel mustered a thin smile. "Let's stay calm for now." Nick placed the call. Rachel busied herself at the sink, trying not to hover. She listened to his muffled voice in the next room, picking up snippets like, "I understand," and "Yes, I can verify." After several minutes, he returned, his expression tight with worry. "He told me the wire is in process," Nick said, making air quotes with his fingers. "But the receiving bank flagged it for additional review, apparently because of the sum. It could be tomorrow or the next day." Rachel's shoulders sagged. Tomorrow or the next day. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. She'd clung to hope all week, and it seemed every sunrise brought fresh delays. Nick's gaze flicked to her, apology written across his face. "I'm sorry. If I'd known it would be this complicated." She raised a hand to stop him. "I know it's not your fault, but..." She trailed off, not wanting to rehash the weight of her mortgage threats. "Let's just see what the day brings. There's enough to do around here to stay busy." For the remainder of the morning, they tackled chores in an uneasy rhythm. The drizzle turned heavier, drenching them as they hammered extra braces onto the problem fence post. Mud coated their boots, Nick grimaced at the soggy boards, but he kept working. By noon, they'd reinforced the entire corner, ensuring no goat could slip out. They returned to the house, shedding wet jackets. Rachel prepared a quick lunch of leftover pasta and chopped vegetables. Nick stared at his phone on the table, refreshing the screen between bites. Each time, disappointment clouded his features. "Have you considered calling your brother?" Rachel ventured at last. She set down her fork, arms folded. "You said he might help expedite things, right?" Nick's jaw tightened. "Yeah, that's a last resort. But maybe I'm there, He exhaled heavily. "We don't exactly get along. He's the poster child for the family corporation while I'm the black sheep. I hate the idea of proving him right, that I can't handle my own affairs." Rachel studied him, empathizing with his pride. "Sometimes we have to swallow pride to do what's necessary. I hate asking for help too, but sometimes it's the only way." His gaze flickered over her face. "You're right," he murmured. "I'll think about it tonight. If nothing moves by tomorrow, I'll call him." The rain tapered off mid-afternoon, leaving the fields glistening and the air humid. Nick poured his pent-up frustration into yard maintenance, trimming overgrown brush near the orchard. Rachel cleaned the barn stalls, grateful that at least the goats seemed content. Still, a heaviness pressed on her chest, an unspoken countdown of how many days she had before her finances imploded. When it was time to pick Lily up, Rachel offered Nick the choice to come along or stay. He opted to remain behind, longing to check the phone in case an update came through. The drive felt strangely lonely without him. Lily chattered about new songs she'd learned, but Rachel's mind remained tangled in worry. She steeled herself on the road back, imagining the possible worst-case scenario: the wire never arriving, or the money locked in limbo. She'd have to raise funds somehow else, maybe by selling half her goats or taking a part-time job in town. Would she be able to keep Lily in that camp if things got dire? They arrived at the farm to find Nick pacing by the porch, phone pressed to his ear. The slump of his shoulders told Rachel the news wasn't good. Lily sensed the tension too, falling silent as she climbed out of the truck. Nick ended the call and approached, forced cheer in his eyes. "No new developments," he said shortly. "But I managed to speak with my friend's bank rep. They promised it's just a temporary hold." His gaze flicked to Lily and he tried to soften his tone. "Hey, Lily, how was camp?" Lily looked up at him, hugging her backpack. "It was okay," she murmured, picking up on the subdued mood. "Is your money stuck?" she asked in a small voice. Nick paused as though searching for the right words. "Kind of, yeah. But hopefully not for long." Rachel guided Lily inside, deciding to whip up a snack and distract her. Nick trailed them, but his tension was palpable in every step. While Lily munched on apple slices, Rachel beckoned Nick to the other side of the kitchen. "Look," she said, keeping her voice low, "I don't want to push you, but we're running out of time. If tomorrow passes without any real progress, maybe your brother is the answer." Nick closed his eyes briefly. "I know. I'll call him tomorrow if nothing changes." That night, the mood around the dinner table was subdued. Even Lily's camp stories couldn't dispel the heavy silence for long. After they ate, Rachel helped Lily gather things for the next day, then sent her to bed with a gentle pat on the head. Nick retreated to the barn loft early, saying he needed to think. Rachel climbed into her own bed, exhaustion seeping into her bones. She stared at the dark ceiling for a long time, hearing the faint hoot of an owl. It seemed her world had shrunk to revolve around one question. Would Nick's money come through in time? And if not, how long until her bank lost patience? She drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of cracked earth and goats, wandering across endless fields, with no fences in sight. The next morning arrived sunny and clear, the post-rain air fresh with promise. Rachel woke to find Nick rummaging through his phone by the kitchen window, tension etched on his features. Lily was still asleep, so Rachel approached quietly. He shook his head before she could speak. Nothing. I mean, the wire is still pending review. I might have to bite the bullet and call my brother. Rachel swallowed, oddly relieved. Probably best. Nick mustered a humorless laugh. He's going to rub this in my face for years, but I have no choice. He stepped outside, phone in hand, leaving Rachel alone with her swirling thoughts. She busied herself making coffee, the only sound the drip of the machine. After several minutes, Nick returned, his expression grim. He didn't answer, Nick said, shoulders slumping. I left a voicemail, said it was urgent. He'll call back, but who knows when. Rachel stared at him, fear creeping in. Okay, we'll wait. Again. She left him in the kitchen, drifting to the porch for air. The orchard glistened in morning light, but she found no peace in the view. Another wave of anxiety rolled through her, accompanied by the weight of her mortgage deadlines. Perhaps she should call the bank herself, beg for more time. Yet she knew the conversation would be humiliating at best. When Lily awoke, Rachel forced a bright tone to mask her worry, packing her daughter's lunch and driving to camp as usual. She kissed Lily's temple, telling her to have fun, then drove home in near silence. Back at the farm, she found Nick hunched over the kitchen table, phone lying face down. He looked up with hollow eyes. Still nothing from my brother. My friend's bank says maybe tomorrow. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I feel like I'm letting you down. She dropped her purse on a chair, a wave of resigned frustration coursing through her. We'll manage for another day, she said, though her voice trembled. But I need you to understand, if something doesn't happen soon, I might lose this place. I got a final warning from the mortgage lender. There's no wiggle room left. Nick raked his fingers through his hair, anguish crossing his face. Then I'll do whatever it takes. I'll drive to my brother's house if I must. I can't let you lose your farm because of my problems. She swallowed the lump in her throat, acknowledging that Nick's struggles weren't the sole cause of her predicament. Still, his promise was all she had. Thank you, she whispered, wishing the words didn't sound so hollow. They threw themselves into chores again, as though sheer labor might stave off calamity. Nick cleaned out feed bins, hammered in a few more nails on the fence, while Rachel checked the well pump. The relentless chores kept them from sinking into despair. By mid-afternoon, Lily was back from camp, yet the tension remained, an unspoken undercurrent weighing down every conversation. Finally, as dusk approached, Nick's phone rang. He snatched it up, stepping outside. Rachel trailed behind, heart pounding. She listened intently as Nick spoke in clipped tones. Yeah, I know, Nick said, voice edged with frustration. Listen, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. Fine. Thank you. Send it to this account. I'll text you the details. He hung up, exhaling harshly. That was my brother, he said to Rachel, forcing a shaky laugh. He's agreed to front me whatever I need. I guess I'll owe him a favor, but at least it'll be immediate. Relief collided with caution in Rachel's chest. So, it means tomorrow I'll have enough to pay Barton's, repay you, and help you with whatever else. My brother said he'd wire it first thing. Nick paused, eyes full of conflicting emotions. He also wants me to fly back for a family meeting, but I told him I'd do that after I settle things here. A surge of gratitude and worry washed over her in equal measure. He was willing to postpone his own family obligations to ensure her farm stayed afloat. She wanted to believe the nightmare was ending. But a small voice inside reminded her, talk is cheap. She needed to see the funds in actual numbers before celebrating. Still, she allowed herself a trembling smile. Thank you, she said softly, blinking away tears of pent-up stress. I can't even express how much this means. Nick reached out impulsively, clasping her hand. You saved me when I was stranded, Rachel. It's the least I can do to return the favor. They stood like that, the hush of twilight around them, hearts pounding with tentative hope. Tomorrow could be the breakthrough that changed everything. Tomorrow might grant them breathing room in a world that had grown too tight. Rachel awoke with a jolt, heart fluttering as though she'd received an electric shock. For a moment she couldn't place the source of her excitement. Then it rushed back in a wave. Nick's brother's wire. Today was the day it should finally appear. She threw back the covers, adrenaline spurring her to get dressed in record time. The rays of early sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the old farmhouse with a warm glow. She found Nick already in the kitchen, phone in hand, his expression tense. He glanced up and offered a fleeting smile. Before she could say anything, he shook his head slightly, as if to say, "Not yet." Her heart sank, but she reminded herself that bank transactions could take hours to update. "Morning," she whispered, not wanting to wake Lily just yet. "Maybe it'll go through soon." Nick inhaled deeply, setting the phone aside. "I'll wait an hour or two before I call," he said. "It might still be processing." They drank coffee in a subdued hush. Outside, a few goats bleated lazily, and the faint hum of cicadas signaled another warm day. Though the morning was calm, Rachel felt the tension coil inside her. She wanted to check her own bank statement, but it seemed pointless until Nick confirmed he had his funds. Eventually, Lily patted in, hair ruffled from sleep. She rubbed her eyes and smiled. "I'm hungry," she announced, glancing between them. "Did something good happen? You both look nervous." Rachel forced a light laugh. "We're waiting on money, Sweet Pea. Once it comes, we can fix Nick's bike and pay off some bills." Lily's face brightened. "Really? Then Nick can ride me around the yard on the motorcycle?" Before Rachel could scold the idea, Nick raised both hands. "Definitely not without your mom's permission," he said. "And I'm not sure a yard ride is safe, but maybe we can talk about it." Lily huffed in playful annoyance, but she seemed happy enough with the possibility. Rachel ruffled her daughter's hair, then busied herself whipping up pancakes. It was a modest celebration in anticipation of the wire. When the plates were clean, Rachel and Nick stepped out to the porch, scanning the empty driveway as though expecting a delivery person. Absurd, she thought. Money would arrive electronically, not by mail. But it felt like waiting for a miracle. "I'll try the app again," Nick muttered, pulling out his phone. Rachel watched his face as he typed his password. His brow furrowed, then his expression went slack with disbelief. She clutched the porch railing, heart pounding. Finally, he raised his gaze to hers, and a brilliant grin spread across his features. "It's there," he breathed. "The funds are in." Her knees went weak with relief. She let out a tremulous laugh, stepping forward to peer at his phone screen. Sure enough, the balance was displayed in black and white, an amount more than enough to handle repairs, the towing fee, and even a chunk of her mortgage. "Oh, thank God," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "You really came through." Nick's laughter cracked, part joy, part exhaustion. "Let's go celebrate by paying those bills right now." He paused, eyes glimmering. "Seriously, I don't want to waste a minute." She nodded, blinking back tears. Lily, peeking through the door, caught the excitement and bounded outside. "Is it here? Did you get it?" she asked. Nick scooped her up, spinning her in a circle, and Lily squealed with delight. Rachel laughed through her own swirl of emotion. Within half an hour they were in the truck. Lily settled safely at home with permission to watch TV for a while. The plan was simple. First, they'd drive to the local bank so Nick could withdraw what he needed for Barton's garage, plus repay Rachel. Then they'd head to the shop, settle the repair bill in full, and arrange for the finishing touches on the motorcycle. The drive to the bank was a blur of mounting excitement. Nick updated Rachel on the figure he intended to withdraw, enough to cover everything, plus a little extra for immediate mortgage relief. When they arrived, he shot her a tentative look. "You can come inside if you like." Rachel swallowed, uncertain if she should intrude. But curiosity and relief pushed her forward. She followed Nick into the cool marble-floored lobby, where a teller greeted them. Nick explained the large withdrawal, and the teller asked for multiple forms of ID. Rachel's stomach clenched, worried about more bureaucratic hurdles. But Nick produced his passport, driver's license, and relevant documents. After a few tense minutes, the teller nodded and disappeared into a back room. They waited side by side, the silence thick. Finally, the teller returned with an envelope and a receipt. Nick exhaled, accepting both, then turned to Rachel with a triumphant grin. Done. She stared at the envelope, stunned by the turn of events. For months, she'd operated on a shoestring budget, constantly teetering on the brink. Now, in a single moment, Nick had the means to rescue her from immediate ruin. Her pride bristled, but survival demanded she swallow it. They returned to the truck. Nick opened the envelope, counted out a portion, and placed it in a separate, smaller envelope. This covers your towing fee, plus a bit for your mortgage, he said softly, offering it to her. Use it however you see fit. Her hand shook as she took it, eyes stinging. Thank you, she managed. I can't even... He squeezed her shoulder gently, then started the engine. Let's go see Barton and clear the repair bill. At Barton's garage, Pete the mechanic raised an eyebrow at the sight of Nick carrying a wad of bills, but he quickly grew businesslike. Well, looks like we got the harness you needed, he said, slapping a greasy rag on the counter. Fuel lines have been replaced too. She's running, but we wanted to wait on final payment before we buttoned her up. You can ride out today if you settle now. Nick grinned. That's exactly what I'm here for. He handed over the precise amount in cash, ignoring Pete's wide-eyed reaction. The mechanic scribbled a receipt, mumbling about how he'd never seen folks pay so quickly in full. Rachel stood by, relief coursing through her. They waited while Pete and an assistant completed final checks on the motorcycle. Standing near the open bay doors, Rachel felt a light breeze pass, as though the entire universe was exhaling with her. Nick cast her a sideways glance, uncertain. How do you feel? She leaned against the cinder block wall. Lighter. Still, there's a lot to figure out, but you've given me breathing room. She shook her head, swallowing a fresh swell of emotion. I can't thank you enough. He smiled, pushing his hair back. You saved me first, I'm just returning the favor. Soon, Pete signaled them over, pointing to the newly serviced bike. Its chrome glistened in the overhead lights. Nick inspected it briefly, turning the ignition. The engine purred, smooth as silk. He let out a breathy laugh, gratitude etched across his features. You're all set, Pete said. Take her for a spin if you like. Just watch these country roads. Some are still slick from the recent rain. Nick nodded, swung his leg over the seat, then glanced back at Rachel. I'll just circle around the block. Be back in a minute. She smiled, stepping aside as he revved the engine. The sound echoed through the garage, stirring a sense of finality. He eased the bike forward, accelerating gently down the winding street. Rachel felt an odd pang in her chest, half excitement, half an unspoken sense that things would never be quite the same again. While he was gone, Pete wiped his hands on a rag. Nice guy, your friend, he remarked, eyeing Rachel. I see folks from all walks of life come through here. He's different. Rachel only nodded, unsure how to respond. Nick returned moments later, pulling up with a broad grin. The bike sounded perfect, the ride evidently smooth. He powered off the engine and swung off, pockets bulging with receipts. She's better than new, he said to Rachel. Ready to head back? They climbed into her truck, leaving the motorcycle behind for the moment since Nick wanted to follow her back to the farm. On the way, Rachel checked the smaller envelope he'd given her. It contained more cash than she'd expected. Her throat constricted, torn between gratitude and pride. You gave me extra, she managed to say, voice low. He didn't look at her, gaze fixed on the winding road. I meant what I said. Use it for the mortgage, or pay down any other debts first. My friend gave me enough to cover not just my crisis, but to help you. I'd do more if you let me. She squeezed the envelope, tears pricking again. You've done plenty. This is enough to stop the worst from happening. Let me figure out my next steps from here. He nodded. All right, but remember, I'm still open to discussing a partnership if you want. No rush. They reached the farm under a bright midday sun. Lily, who'd been anxiously awaiting them, rushed out, squealing when Nick revealed the bike was fixed. Can I see it? She asked, eyes shining. Nick laughed. Sure, let me ride it up the driveway. He hopped on Rachel's truck tailgate, motioning for her to drive him back to the garage. She obliged, though the trip was strangely quiet. Rachel was still coming to terms with what his help meant for her future. Once they arrived, Nick started the bike again, following behind the pickup in a gentle convoy back to Bramblewood Farm. At the farmhouse, Lily clapped her hands in delight as Nick rolled in, engine rumbling. He cut it off and let her examine the shiny parts from a safe distance, explaining how each piece worked. Rachel stood on the porch, arms folded loosely, heart brimming with relief, tinged by the knowledge that Nick's departure might come sooner now. After Lily calmed down, Rachel guided them inside for cold drinks. Nick set his helmet aside, running a hand through his hair. Well, he began, voice subdued, I guess I can head out soon. But I'd like to stay at least another day or two if that's okay. Tie up loose ends, make sure you're all right. Is that too much to ask? She let out a breath. You can stay as long as you need. Or as long as you want, I mean. Lily's gotten attached. A small smile quirked her lips. But you've done more than enough, so don't feel obligated. He nodded, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. I want to be sure you're steady on your feet, and I enjoy being here. For the next hour, they relaxed in the living room, Lily rattling off ideas about painting the barn a new color, raising more chickens, and maybe even adopting a rescued horse. Rachel alternated between rolling her eyes and laughing, secretly pleased that Lily felt so inspired. Soon, Lily grew sleepy from the excitement, and Rachel nudged her to take a brief rest. She and Nick retreated to the porch again, the sun's rays illuminating the orchard. Rachel inhaled the sweet summer air, a knot of gratitude lodged in her chest. Thank you, she whispered. 100 times, thank you. Nick looked away, almost shy. I owe you as many thanks in return. And there, in the hush of a midday that felt strangely full of promise, they let themselves hope that life had turned a corner. One where hardship could finally yield to the possibility of something kinder, even if they couldn't name exactly what that might be. Rachel stood on the farmhouse porch the next morning, gazing across her land with a swell of quiet wonder. It was only a day after Nick had settled his repair bill and handed her enough money to appease the mortgage company, but the difference in her heart felt enormous. For the first time in ages, she wasn't waking up in a panic. The sky stretched wide and brilliant above the rolling fields, the orchard dappled in early sunlight. Somewhere behind the barn, Lily's laughter rang out and Rachel smiled at the sound. Her daughter free to enjoy summer without the shadow of foreclosure. She turned to see Nick walking toward the house, wiping sweat from his brow after an early round of chores. He'd offered to gather eggs and check the goats again, determined to leave the place in better shape than he'd found it. The sight of him striding across the yard, hair ruffled by the gentle breeze, sent a flicker of warmth through Rachel. She was still grappling with the magnitude of his generosity, unsure how to balance gratitude against her ingrained self-reliance. Morning, Nick said, stepping onto the porch. The goats are in good spirits, and I think one of them's about to kid soon. She's restless and looks ready. Rachel's brows lifted. I've been watching that doe. She's due any day now. Could be we'll have a new baby goat before the week is out. Nick grinned. Wouldn't that be something? A new life on the farm. Feels symbolic. She nodded, a flush creeping into her cheeks. I'd like to think so. Gesturing toward the kitchen, she continued, I made coffee if you want some. Lily's up too, rummaging in the pantry for a snack. Nick agreed, and they headed inside, letting the screen door thump gently behind them. In the kitchen, Lily emerged with a piece of toast, announcing that she was going to the orchard to look for interesting leaves for her camp craft project. Rachel waved her off with a reminder to stay in sight. Once Lily disappeared, Rachel and Nick settled at the table, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. So, she began tentatively, hands wrapped around her mug, what's next for you? Your bike's fixed, your accounts are untangled, and your brother sent you that large sum. Are you heading out soon? Nick leaned back in the chair, drumming his fingers against the tabletop. I've been wrestling with that. Part of me thinks I should get back on the road, maybe continue west as I originally planned. But honestly, I don't feel the same rush to keep moving. It's like I found something here that I didn't realize I was looking for. Rachel's pulse skipped. Something? Or someone? She teased gently, though her heart pounded at the implication. He smiled, eyes flicking to hers. Both. This farm, Lily, and you. His voice turned earnest. I've never really felt at home in the corporate world, and traveling aimlessly started to feel hollow. But here, working with you, helping out, it's fulfilling in a way I didn't expect. She inhaled, emotions tangling in her chest. Nick, I won't deny I've grown accustomed to having you around, but I also don't want you to feel obligated to stay. You've already done so much. Nick set his mug down. I'm not talking about staying forever uninvited, but if you're open to it, I'd like to explore that idea we mentioned, an investment or partnership that keeps your farm stable long term. I can't promise it'll be easy. My family might gripe, but I have the resources now to do things independently, and if it means I can help you expand while I learn more about rural life, well, he exhaled. It sounds like a future that makes sense to me. Rachel's stomach flipped. The notion of forging a business tie with Nick had lingered in her thoughts, equal parts enticing and terrifying. She sipped her coffee to hide her nerves. I won't say no outright, she said slowly. But I need to think. This place is more than a business. It's my home. I've always managed alone. Sharing ownership is a big step. He nodded, understanding in his expression. Take your time. There's no rush. I might stick around a few more days anyway. Get a sense of the finances. See if we can identify areas to improve. They agreed to talk more later. For the time being, Rachel rose to handle the day's tasks, gathering vegetables from the garden, checking the irrigation hoses, and sorting through the leftover feed bins. Nick offered to assist, and they spent the morning side by side, discussing small changes that might make the farm more profitable. When Lily returned from the orchard, proudly brandishing leaves and wildflowers, Nick helped her press them between sheets of cardboard to preserve them. By noon, the three convened in the kitchen for sandwiches. They ate with an easy companionship that felt alarmingly like a family. Lily chattered about camp events, while Nick asked her questions about the mural project. Rachel, glancing between them, felt a tug at her heart. She'd never expected Lily to grow so fond of Nick in such a short time, nor had she expected Nick to be so attentive. As Lily went to watch a children's show, Nick and Rachel lingered at the table, gazing out the window. The orchard shimmered in the midday sun, and beyond it stretched a wide expanse of fields. Rachel finally gathered her courage. Remember how you said you had connections, that maybe we could market the goat cheese or sell produce more widely? She asked, forcing a steady tone. What would that look like if we tried it? Nick's face lit up with eagerness. We'd start small, maybe find a distributor or local grocers who'd carry your products. Then we could see about an online presence. People love artisanal goods these days. If the farm brand picks up, you could expand the goat herd, add more cheeses, or even branch into other specialties. It wouldn't happen overnight, but with the right capital, You could increase output steadily. She chewed her lip. It sounds good in theory, but I don't know the first thing about marketing beyond local markets. He shrugged confidently. That's where I can help. I might not be a marketing guru, but I know people who are. Or I could pay for professional advice. You'd make final decisions, obviously. I'd just connect the dots. Rachel tried to imagine such a future, one where her goat cheese brand reached beyond the county, maybe even across state lines. The mental image felt equal parts thrilling and daunting, but it was better than living in perpetual survival mode. After a moment, she smiled hesitantly. Let's make a plan then. But I still want to read the fine print of any formal partnership. I can't risk losing my farm or handing control over to strangers. Of course, he said, exhaling relief. We'll do it on your terms. The rest of the afternoon flew by in a flurry of activity. Nick drafted a rough outline of how they might structure an investment, scrawling notes on a yellow pad. Rachel paced the kitchen, occasionally stepping out to check on Lily, who was practicing cartwheels in the yard. Each time she'd catch a glimpse of Nick scribbling earnestly, and a wave of gratitude swept her. An unexpected phone call came late in the day. Rachel's mother, who lived several hours away, wanting to check on them. I heard rumors about the farm being in trouble, her mother said, voice sharp with concern. Are you okay, Rachel? Rachel gripped the phone tighter. I'm fine, Mom, really. I had a bit of a scare, but a friend helped me out. We're stable now, or at least on the path to it. Her mother exhaled. A friend, huh? Is that friend standing right there? Rachel glanced across the living room at Nick, who was fiddling with a model figurine Lily had painted. He's, in the other room. It's a long story, but yeah, he's been a godsend. She could practically hear her mother's eyebrows rising. Well, I'd like to meet him sometime. In fact, your sister is hosting a barbecue next week. You two should come down, let us see you and Lily, and you can bring this new friend. Heat rushed to Rachel's cheeks. The idea of presenting Nick to her extended family felt surreal. I'll think about it, she hedged. It depends on the farm's schedule. They spoke a few more minutes, her mother reassuring her that she'd always have a place to stay if times got tough. Rachel thanked her but said nothing about the partnership idea. That felt too fresh, too uncertain. When she hung up, Nick raised an inquisitive brow. Everything all right? She shrugged, cheeks still warm. That was my mom. She wants me to bring you to a family gathering. Guess she's curious about the man who rescued us from financial doom. Nick's grin softened. I'd be honored, but only if you really want me there. Rachel sighed, a swirl of conflicting emotions. I'm not sure. My family can be overbearing, and they might push me to explain everything. But maybe it's time they see I'm not alone. Not anymore, anyway. His eyes flicked with gratitude at the implication that she considered him an ally. Well, the invitation stands. Let me know. They returned to the kitchen to finalize the day's notes on potential expansions for the farm. Lily, hearing the excited chatter, scampered in with a suggestion of her own. We should buy a llama, she declared, wide-eyed. Rachel and Nick burst into laughter. Nightfall came gently, the sun dipping behind the orchard. Rachel prepared a light dinner of roasted vegetables and leftover chicken. The mood at the table was bright with possibility. Lily's chatter filled the spaces, Nick added jokes, and Rachel felt strangely at peace. She realized she hadn't experienced such genuine, ongoing hope in years. Afterward, Lily went to shower, leaving Rachel and Nick alone in the living room. They sat on the couch, documents and scribbled notes scattered across the coffee table. A warm hush settled around them. Nick tapped a page with his pen. If we set this up as a minority investment, you keep majority ownership. You'd be free to run the farm as you see fit, but I'd get a small share of profits. Mostly I'd be covering expansions, equipment upgrades, maybe marketing campaigns. Over time, if you want me out, I'd let you buy back my share at a fair valuation. Rachel nodded, scanning the page. It's more generous than I expected. You're basically giving me control while taking the financial risk. He shrugged, eyes earnest. I believe in you. You rescued me in more ways than one. Helping you feels like I'm finally investing in something real, not just chasing corporate profits. Emotion tightened her throat. You're incredible, she whispered. I'm not used to this kind of faith from anyone besides Lily. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers gently with hers. Then get used to it, he said softly. Because I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to. She swallowed, heart thudding. The closeness between them felt both thrilling and tender. Slowly, she leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his shoulder. They sat there in a hush of unspoken understanding, forging a connection that went beyond debts and deals. Just then, Lily called from the hallway, announcing she was done. The moment dissolved, and Rachel pulled back with a shaky smile, standing to gather the papers. Still, a warmth lingered, radiating through her chest like a silent promise. They said goodnight soon after, Nick returning to the barn loft. Rachel tucked Lily into bed, hearing the crickets chirp through the open windows. As she settled into her own room, she closed her eyes and reflected on how drastically her world had changed in so little time. By tomorrow, she'd contact the mortgage lender with full confidence, enough funds in hand to push back the wolves at the door. In the quiet darkness, she allowed herself to dream of a future where the orchard thrived, the goats multiplied, and Lily grew up content in this place they called home. A future where Nick might linger by choice, investing not just money but his spirit into their life together. For once, the uncertainty ahead felt less like a threat and more like an open road, one she might dare travel without fear. Days at Bramblewood Farm settled into a comfortable cadence after Rachel and Nick first discussed their potential partnership. Mornings began with shared chores among the goats and chickens, followed by coffee at the worn kitchen table. Afternoons found them brainstorming ways to make the farm more profitable. Lily, delighted by the grown-ups' newfound optimism, alternated between camp activities and bounding around the fields, drumming up ideas like llama rides or milkshake stands. Her laughter seemed to herald a new era of hope. One warm afternoon, with the sun riding high and a light breeze rustling the orchard's leaves, Rachel took a bold step. She'd scheduled a phone meeting with her mortgage lender to confirm the payment she'd made using part of Nick's funds, and to hammer out a plan for catching up. While Nick tinkered with the barn's storage area, she locked herself in the small office off the living room and waited for the call to connect. Her nerves jangled. Even after sending enough money to halt foreclosure, she feared complications. But 10 minutes into the conversation, relief unfurled through her like a warm current. The lender confirmed the account was no longer in default. If she kept up smaller payments for the next few months, she could realign her loan without additional penalties. Rachel thanked them, tears gathering in her eyes. After so many sleepless nights, it felt like stepping into fresh air after being trapped underground. She emerged victorious, telling Lily and Nick the news. Lily whooped and hugged Rachel's waist, while Nick beamed with quiet pride. The tension that had shadowed the farm seemed to lift, letting in the bright summer sun. That evening, Lily's camp announced a family open house for the weekend, inviting all parents to mingle with counselors and watch the kids perform skits. Rachel had planned to attend alone, but Lily insisted that Nick come too, batting her eyelashes and explaining he was part of the family now. Rachel, cheeks flushing, softly said he was welcome. Nick hesitated, worried it might feel intrusive. But Lily's excitement overrode any reservation. He agreed with a small, grateful smile. The week passed quickly, a flurry of small farm tasks and deeper conversations. Nick drafted sample marketing materials for the goat cheese, using images he'd snapped of the goats, orchard, and garden. He phoned a contact in a neighboring county who ran a specialty grocer, arranging a trial order for Rachel's cheeses. Meanwhile, Rachel discovered a new confidence in talking about her farm. Her past struggles no longer defined her. With Nick's support, she felt capable of aiming higher. As Saturday dawned, they drove Lily to the camp's open house. The children bustled around excitedly, setting up makeshift stage areas. Parents gathered on folding chairs to watch the presentations. Rachel and Nick sat side by side, watching Lily's group perform a short comedic skit involving cardboard swords and handcrafted crowns. Lily giggled on stage, glancing often at their smiling faces. After the applause, parents mingled near refreshment tables, praising the kids. Nick found himself chatting with Lily's counselor, who joked that Lily's creativity was boundless. Rachel stood nearby, nibbling on cookies. She felt a swell of admiration seeing Nick blend so easily into the small-town atmosphere, a far cry from the corporate world he'd left behind. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine him staying for good. Later, as they were about to leave, a rumbling commotion drew everyone's attention. Rachel glanced skyward, spotting something large and black approaching over the treetops. A helicopter. The churning blades battered the air, sending leaves scattering as it descended toward an open field beside the camp. Children shrieked in excitement, counselors scrambling to guide them back. Parents exchanged puzzled looks. The helicopter's landing gear touched the grass, engines still thrumming with imposing force. Suddenly, Nick's face went pale. He muttered something under his breath, stepping forward as though transfixed. Rachel's pulse hammered. This was no ordinary visitor to a children's camp. The helicopter door slid open, and a sharp-dressed man in sunglasses hopped out. He waved away the pilot's signals and marched across the field, ignoring the wide-eyed stares. Nick swore under his breath. "Is that—" Rachel began, but Nick gave a grim nod. "My brother," he said tightly. "He never does anything subtly." The man reached them, ignoring the swirling dust. Though older than Nick, he shared enough resemblance to be unmistakably family. He surveyed the scene, mouth curved in a faint smirk. "You're a hard man to track down," he drawled. "So I thought I'd drop in." His gaze flicked to Rachel, lingering. "And you must be the reason Nick's been playing Farmer John out in the sticks." Nick bristled, stepping closer. "Rachel, meet my brother, Aiden Lockwood. Aiden, this is Rachel Morgan and her daughter Lily." Aiden offered a curt nod. "Charmed." He glanced around, taking in the camp's improvised stage and the ring of curious onlookers. "Nick, let's talk, privately." Rachel's stomach tightened. Lily clutched her hand, eyes huge at the sight of the helicopter. Nick hesitated, turning to Rachel with a look that said he had little choice. "I'll be right back," he promised. Then he marched off with Aiden, heading a short distance away from the crowd. From where she stood, Rachel saw them engage in a hushed, heated conversation. Aiden gestured toward the helicopter, apparently demanding something. Nick shook his head, arms folded. The voices were low, but tension pulsed in every motion. Lily tugged on Rachel's arm, whispering, "Why is that man so angry?" Rachel forced a comforting smile. "He's not angry, sweet pea. Just worried about Nick. Let's wait here." Minutes later, Nick returned alone, expression conflicted. Aiden remained by the helicopter, talking on his phone. Nick cleared his throat. "He wants me to go back with him," he said quietly. "He's furious I've been gone so long and used the family's resources to bail myself out. He also thinks I've lost my mind investing in a farm." Rachel's heart twisted. "So what will you do?" Nick exhaled, gaze flicking to Lily, who stared up at him with worried eyes. "I told him I'm staying, at least for now. We have an agreement about finances, and I'm not violating it. He can't force me to return, but he's not happy. He basically threatened that if I don't show my face soon, I'll lose my seat on the board." A swirl of relief and apprehension swept over Rachel. He was refusing to leave, choosing them over corporate demands, but she feared the cost. "Nick," she said softly, "I don't want you sacrificing everything. If you need to go, I understand. His jaw tightened. I told him I'm free to direct my own funds as I see fit. If they cut me out, so be it. I can live with that. Before Rachel could reply, Aiden stalked over, phone in hand. Time's up, Nick, I'm leaving, he said tersely, eyeing Rachel. I expect a better explanation than I'm playing hero on some goat ranch next time we talk. Mother wants to see you. Don't make her wait forever. Then he pivoted, shooting a glance at Lily. Have a nice day. He stormed back to the waiting helicopter, engines revving. Dust kicked up once more, swirling around them in an agitated cloud. Children squealed, counselors shielding their eyes. With a final roar, the helicopter lifted away, disappearing into the summer sky. Nick let out a long breath. Sorry, he murmured. He's always been that way. Rachel gently touched his arm. It's okay. I'm just glad you're not coerced into leaving immediately. He gazed at her, determination in his eyes. I'm here by choice. They returned home, Lily chattering about how cool the helicopter was. Nick laughed, though Rachel sensed the turmoil roiling beneath his grin. In the quiet of the farmhouse kitchen, after Lily ran off to change, Nick sank into a chair. I feel bad you had to witness that, he said. My family can be dramatic. But I meant what I said. This farm matters to me. The partnership we discussed, my involvement, none of that changes because Aiden flew in spouting threats. Rachel settled beside him. I won't pretend it's not intimidating to see your brother land in a helicopter. But if you truly want to stay, I'd like that. You've done so much for me and Lily. He leaned forward, hand finding hers. I want to help you build something lasting. And if that means turning my back on certain family privileges, so be it. Her throat tightened. You won't regret it? His lips curved into a gentle smile. Not for a second. With that, he gently squeezed her fingers, sealing a vow of solidarity beyond words. The next morning, Rachel awoke to find Nick drafting more thorough plans for the farm's expansion. Lily bounced around, showing him drawings of goats with little crowns. As they laughed together, Rachel felt a stirring of wonder. The farm was still modest, the future uncertain, but their bond was strong. Together they'd faced desperate times, uneasy finances, and even a helicopter arrival. Now they stood poised on the brink of a new chapter, one shaped by shared hope. A week later, Rachel visited her bank in person, handing over a check that covered the overdue amount, plus a chunk of principal. The teller smiled, impressed. Looks like you're catching up nicely, Miss Morgan. Rachel walked out on legs that trembled with triumph. That evening, Nick quietly gave her a formal contract to review, outlining an investment that kept her ownership intact. She read it by lamplight, tears of cautious joy sliding down her cheeks. Nothing about the future was guaranteed. Nick's family might keep pressuring him. New challenges might arise, and running a farm always teetered on the edge of unpredictability. But with each sunrise, Rachel grew more certain that her lonely struggle had eased, replaced by a partnership forged in trust. Late one afternoon, Rachel and Nick strolled to the orchard. The wind carried the murmur of goats from a distance, and Lily's voice floated on the breeze as she sang a camp song. Nick paused by an ancient apple tree, taking Rachel's hand. Thank you, he whispered, for teaching me what real roots look like. She squeezed his fingers, heart full. Thank you for choosing to plant yours here. And as the sun dipped low, bathing the orchard in gentle gold, they stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. A single mom farmer and the runaway billionaire who'd found his purpose in her quiet corner of the world.